Morning, everybody. Good morning out there. Welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 15th. I want to ask all of you to turn your cell phones to silent and to make sure, particularly for us up here, that they're off at the table to avoid any feedback noise. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on it, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. I'd like to call this meeting to order, but before we call the roll, I want to introduce to my right Noreen Marks, who is our transitional legal counsel. Now, tomorrow, our newest legal counsel, Michael Knotes, will be here. So let's welcome Noreen Marks. And I'd like to ask the secretary to call the roll, please.
Good morning. This room is like Disney World compared to Disneyland. So welcome to the Magic Kingdom of the Dental Board. Burton.
Here.
Burton present. Chan present. Chappelle Ingram absent. Lai. Here. Lai present. Laren. Laren present. Lay. Lay present. Mackenzie. Here. Mackenzie present. Medina.
Here.
Medina present. Morrow. Here. Morrow present. Alagi. Here. Alagi present. Pacheco. Pacheco present. Stewart.
Here.
Stewart present. Witcher. Here. Witcher present. You. You. What do I do?
He's absent right now, and when he joins the meeting, we'll say the job when he joins the meeting.
You absent. Madam President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda, now remember that we have some different numbering here. We don't have tabs. So if you will turn to page 7. That is the February 7th and 8th board meeting minutes. Okay.
We're recognizing that Dr. Yu just joined the meeting. You present.
Okay. So page 7, the February 7th and 8th board minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Did you have something? I will move for approval.
So move.
And let me remind you, as we're making motions, particularly because we're in a bigger room, when you move or second, do it adding your last name.
Morrow, approve.
Burton, second. Mr. Secretary?
All right. Burton.
Yes.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai. Yes. Lai, aye. Laren. Laren, aye. Lay. Lay, aye. Mackenzie. Yes. Mackenzie, yes. Medina.
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow. Yes. Morrow, yes. Olagi. Olagi, yes. Pacheco. Yes. Pacheco, yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher. Yes. Witcher, yes. You.
Yes.
You, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. Page 26 is the President's report. So good morning again, and welcome to this second meeting. Oh, let me withdraw that for a second, and I'm going to go to the executive officer for some further announcements.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Karen Fisher. I'm the executive officer. Just wanted to make a few announcements. The mics, you need to push the button for it to be on, but only 4 mics can be on at one time. So after you speak, if you'll turn off your mic, I think that will be helpful. Wanted to let you know that these name tags, we're going to try something different this time. We're taking the lead from something we've seen at an association meeting. When somebody wants to make a comment, if you'll take your name tag and put it up like this. And that way we don't have people interrupting, we don't have people having to raise your hand. You just might want to keep a little note about what you wanted to say in the event that it takes us a while to peruse. But we're going to have staff on the alert, and I'm going to be on the alert to try to see whose name tag is on the side, and then when you finish with your comment, if you'll put it back down. We'll see if this is helpful, because oftentimes it's hard to see if somebody's hand's up and that. So that's another one of the recommendations I wanted to make at this point. I wanted to also note that in tomorrow's agenda, ADEX was scheduled to be here and give a presentation. They will not be attending. They have asked to be considered for the August meeting. Staff is also going to be passing out to you acknowledgement forms that you should fill out as soon as you can, and that's going to trailer on. We will be sending out a notice as soon as we get back that your sexual harassment prevention training is due this year. It's a 2-hour training that you can take at your convenience. So we'll be sending that link out to you next week so that you can get that completed. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to introduce one of our newest managers, Wilbert Rumboa. If you'll take a stand here, Mr. Rumboa. This is Wilbert's first meeting. He is the new manager over our administration unit at the board. And so if you have any questions, of course, Sarah and Tina are here. Wilbert is also here, and he'll be happy to assist you. I think that pretty well covers everything. We're planning to break for lunch about 11:30, giving everybody the opportunity to go do their thing for an hour and a half. So that's kind of what the schedule is going to look like. So that concludes my announcements at this point, and so we can pick up again with President Burton's welcome and report.
So again, welcome to this second meeting, and certainly not to the exclusion of anyone else who is in the audience. I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Paul Rigardo's attendance today. As most of you know, he was away for a while last year, and we really missed you. And my understanding is that you have a new assignment now, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is Executive Director of the American Academy of Pediatrics? American California Society of Pediatrics. Thank you. We are so happy to see you back. So we're just about halfway, at the halfway mark of this busy year, and we're still focused on sunset review. In addition, we're following legislation, working on regulations, enforcement, examination issues, and other emerging issues as they present themselves. As always, I like to begin with a reminder of our charge. The priority of the board is protection of the public. It is our highest priority in exercising our licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The Dental Practice Act is our guide. Those of us at this dais are charged with the administration of the Dental Practice Act. It is a distinct privilege to have been selected to represent the state of California. So members, in that regard, I ask you to do due diligence to be prepared for this meeting and every meeting. And I understand that that is not always easy, but it is necessary. To our guests who represent some various constituencies, you have a stake in what we do. I want you to know that we will make every attempt to hear your concerns. I also know that there are times when our interests and the decisions we make may be different from what you may want because of our guiding principles. When that is the case, I am hopeful that we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. As I said earlier, this is going to be a busy year, and it has been a busy year. This week after the February board meeting, I had a series of meet and greets with either Senate or Assembly Business and Professions committee members or their designated staff in preparation for the sunset hearing. On March 5th, the executive officer, assistant executive officer, enforcement chief, Vice President Morrill, and I testified before the joint committees. We provided brief presentations and responded to questions. Ms. Fisher will give you more detail on that later. We will also have a discussion later on the status of our sunset bill, which is AB 1519. In March, the executive officer and I attended a breakfast, a great sacrifice for me, given the hour, which was a meet and greet with the leadership of Cal Amos, who were in Sacramento for their annual legislative day. And it was a real pleasure to meet your executive leadership. We also had conference calls with each of you board committee chairs to hear whether there were any emerging issues and whether there were things that you felt should come before the full board. Our full board meetings have had so many agenda items that it can be more expedient to have discussions as a whole. And in this process, we don't want to overlook things that you have identified as being important. Going forward, I hope that those conference calls can be a part of how we do business. In April, the executive officer and I attended the meeting of the Dental Hygiene Board of California. On the first day, I provided an update on our activities, and Hygiene will provide a report at this meeting on their activities since our last board meeting. The Advisory Committee Partnership for the Department of Public Health's Office of Oral Health is meeting while we are here. As a reminder, Dr. Lay and I are the board's representatives to the meeting, to that committee. I'll give you an update on what transpired in our absence at our next meeting. Lastly, again, the housekeeping request that you silence your devices, and for our partners and guests, that you keep your conversations at a respectful tone so as not to be disruptive of others. During the course of the meeting, you will see members accessing devices in order to have electronic agendas. And we're trying to go more to that process. So if you see us doing that, we're taking care of business. As we go through the agenda, I will make every attempt to hear from every member of the public. There may be times during these 2 days when testimony may be limited, and we will make you aware of that, as well as request that you not repeat what has already been said. And I want to thank you in advance for your cooperation on that. So before we get started with today's business, I have the distinct honor of announcing an award to our Karen Fisher. I know that most of the professional members are fellows in the American College of Dentists. For those of you who don't know about the ACD, its mission is to advance ethics, excellence, professionalism, and leadership in dentistry. The American College of Dentists exists to elevate the standards of dentistry, to encourage graduate study, and to grant fellowship to those who have done meritorious work. Honorary fellowships have been offered to non-dentists, usually from academic institutions or American Dental Association associated or affiliated organizations. Karen is being recognized because of her work in the area of licensure and enforcement. She is being recognized for her ongoing leadership in reorganizing, streaming, and transforming both the licensure and enforcement components of what we do so as to be fair to our practitioners, while at the same time recognizing where ethical conduct may cross the line and thus cause harm to the public we serve. Karen was nominated by our colleagues, and the Board of Regents have accepted that nomination. And she will be honored with an honorary fellowship in the American College of Dentists during a meeting and convocation in the fall. There'll be lots of time over the next 2 days to congratulate her personally. And I have made a promise that we won't insist on an acceptance speech today. But I would ask at this time if you would stand with me and recognize Ms. Fisher. That's the end of my report. I'm looking forward to a good meeting. Let's move to the next item on the agenda. This is in a different place than what you're accustomed to. It's public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there public comments? Okay, seeing none, let's go to page 27, and we're going to ask for a report of the Department of Consumer Affairs staffing activities.
Don't want to hit that 4 max microphone. Got a few different updates to run through for you all, so please do bear with me. For the record, Chris Castrillo, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Services with the Department of Consumer Affairs. Really appreciate the opportunity to come down here and address the board. So with that, I'll just hop right into it, run through some of my prepared remarks here, and then more than happy to answer any questions that the board might have. As many of you are aware, Director Dean Graffilo left his post as DCA's director on April 19th. Director Graffilo has been a steadfast mentor and friend to many of us at the department. I know that I'm not alone in expressing my gratitude to serve under his leadership at DCA. We wish him the best of luck as he starts a new chapter in his career. Our executive office is ready to continue working without a beat, and then we will be working with agency and the governor's office to do everything that we can to ensure a smooth transition as we prepare for new leadership at the department, which is also exciting in and of itself, so we're all looking forward to that. The executive officer salary study, so I'll give a little bit of background for folks who are maybe a little bit less familiar. As previously reported, the department retained KH Consulting to conduct an executive officer salary study. The study aims to provide an in-depth analysis of programmatic and operational complexities of the DCA boards and the positions such as Karen holds across all of our programs, as well as salary comparison survey from other states. We did a pretty in-depth salary comparison survey from other states. It proved to be a little bit of a challenge to get all of the data that we were looking for in a timely manner. That pushed our timeline back a little bit. I'm happy to say we have a final report. We're running through the last stages of approval with agency and the governor's office. I am very excited and waiting for that green light to hit send out to all of you. And a quick note on rollout, and it's still TBD, but what we are going to do is we're going to host a conference call for executive officers and board presidents. We'd like to run through the report. We're going to run through the report at a high level, but we feel like it's important because this report has so much individualized information for each programs that myself and our assistant deputy directors, Karen Nelson and Patrick Lay, will be reaching out to individual programs to set up one-on-one conversations with executive officers and board presidents to discuss individual programs in detail. I think we have a great report. I'm really, really excited to get it out with you all, and obviously appreciate everybody's patience. I recognize that we are a little bit behind with this. Couple other items. Technology Advisory Council. On March 7th, the department hosted its first Technology Advisory Council meeting. This is led by Deputy Director of Information Services, Jason Piccioni. The TAC, in case you need another acronym, will discuss trends in technology and government and provide guidance and general direction to our innovative efforts here at DCA. How I've been messaging this to folks is we're looking for anyone from any of our programs who are interested in thinking big about how we can incorporate technology, big technological ideas into the department, and kind of bring us into the sort of 21st century. And for some of our programs, that's as small as we're getting credit card renewals tilted up for as many programs as we can. But we're looking to think really big. So we had our last meeting in March. Jason Piccioni, as I mentioned, is going to be leading that effort. I think we have another meeting coming up in June or July. We think it's really exciting. We think it's in line with a number of the priorities that Governor Gavin Newsom has laid out in terms of bringing technology and government together. So we're excited to have that effort underway. A little bit more on technology. I personally think this is great. I know we have a couple of folks from the dental board who have participated in our licensing and enforcement work groups. We've launched an open data portal. So in January, DCA's Office of Information Services announced the launch of DCA's open data portal. This is a publicly accessible one-stop shop for licensing statistics and information where users can see trends and changes in licensing data going back 3 years. This past month, we have both our licensing and enforcement data live in the site. The department, on a roughly quarterly basis, is going to be reaching out to programs, gathering this information, putting it in on the back end, and then making it live for anybody to view. Would love to make sure that all of the board members have a link. I think it looks great for staff, We think this is a great opportunity. There's one button to run a PowerPoint, to run a PDF. We think that's got a lot of applicability to board meeting materials, packets. So we're really excited about this open data portal. We want people to use it. We want people to explore it and see, again, just kind of the front line of what we do here at DCA, licensing and enforcement. What are our timelines? How quickly are we turning around licenses? So we're super, super excited that we have that launched. Couple other items, and Karen touched on this one for me, so thank you. Sexual harassment prevention training. It is a mandatory sexual harassment prevention training year, so please do get that completed if you have not already. It's online, it's interactive. I think it takes maybe about an hour and a half of your time, so please do have that completed. And then I also wanted to plug, I don't know if this applies to any of you here, but we are having my first BMONT in Southern California. This is something that I understood that we did in years prior. So on June 19th, and BMOT stands for Board Member Orientation Training, I apologize. That's going to be in Riverside at the DGS building. We've heard from a lot of our members. Obviously, we have board members all across DCA from all over the state. We have a lot of folks from Southern California, so we wanted to be responsive to folks who were looking for an option to be able to do this in Southern California. So this is our first go-around with it. We're excited to bring BMOT to you, if you will. And that's it. That concludes my report, but as I said, I'm happy to take any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Chris. I have a comment about your Technology Advisory Committee. Can I give you my cell phone for the work? It crashed last night. I'm not kidding, but
Yeah.
I'm kidding about giving it to you.
Oh, okay. Noted.
So I'm glad we have this Technology Advisory Committee so that we can get that improved. One question about this open data portal. Is that real time, do you know?
It's not real time. Quarterly, so doing I'd say on a 3 to 4 month basis, we're getting our process kind of dialed in. We have folks from my team who will be reaching out to programs saying, hey, please provide us your data from the last 3 months. We then put it in a format that makes our OIS data governance team readily available to just plug it in and make it to the site. Ideally, some point in the future, we would love for that to be real-time information. We think this is a step towards that, but for now, it's like roughly a quarterly update on that data.
I think this is a great improvement. We'll be watching and working closely with the department to see that the numbers all jibe. We, at any particular point in time, you'll get different statistics. So we want to make sure that we monitor how this is going, because if board members then get on the portal and say, well, gee, how come these numbers don't match up with what we're getting, we're going to have to be able to respond to you. So it's a new system. We're going to see how it all works. I'm sure we won't be alone in terms of monitoring the statistics. It's a great idea to have this available, but I think that most people don't understand the technology of taking in data and reporting data changes almost by the minute. So a lot of numbers may not add up, or so we'll just have to be prepared to explain how it's all based. And the fact that you're doing it quarterly is a great start, because I think that offers the public the opportunity to go ahead and use this portal. It'll be awesome. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and just on that note, I think it's a great point, Karen, and we want folks to get in and play around. We think data tells a story, and we think actually a lot of our programs have a good story to tell when it comes to their licensing and enforcement data. There might be, as we roll this out, you're looking at the open data portal and saying, gee, we're getting the last 3 months of our enforcement, our performance measures. Maybe we want to dig a little deeper. Maybe we find some statistical overlays that would improve the data portal, help tell that story a little bit better. So that feedback is going to be crucial, and we're looking for that from all of our programs. So Karen hit it on the head. We're going to be looking to dial this in as we roll it out, and we think it's going to be a super, super effective tool, not only for the department, but for all of our programs and the public.
I just have one more question. Sorry about the executive officer survey. Are you going to be distributing that prior to the teleconference so people have an opportunity to digest it?
Of course.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Before you go, Chris, I wanted to comment also on the survey. This has been a long time coming, and this precedes you, but I'd like to think that we were one of the catalysts for finally getting to that point. So we are looking with anticipation to the results of that, and hopefully a system that is more equitable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, for me, I've said it a couple times now, but I'm very excited to get this out. I think we have a great report. I want to start talking to y'all about it. This is a starting point for a conversation, an important conversation. This report's been a part of the department's strategic plan, and so it's a big deal. And we want to get this thing out and again start talking to folks about it and really make some of the changes that are being recommended and implement them in the department. So you and I are on the same page.
And of course, we would have preferred that it be faster, but sometimes you take what you can get. But just for our newer members, would you give a reminder of who is the deputy in absence of a director?
So we have our Chief Deputy Director, Chris Schultz. He has all the delegated authority that our Director, Dean Grafilo, had. So, again, moving forward and trying to proceed without missing a beat. So there's nothing that we cannot do administratively that we weren't able to do already.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay. If you will go to page 28, we are at agenda item 6, the budget report.
Good morning, board members. Wilbert Rumbawa, Administrative Services Manager for the Dental Board of California. I would like to provide everyone an update regarding the board's budget. So the Dental Board of California manages 2 separate funds. They manage the State Dentistry Fund and the Dental Assisting Fund. The expenditures attached in the report today give you an update of July 1st, 2018 to February 28th of 2019. All expenditures are currently up to date, regardless of the February date, because we work with the budget office to pull in an extraction report. So these are the most up-to-date data we have. To date, for the Dental Board of California, the board has spent approximately $7.6 million of their $14.1 million budget, which is approximately 54% of the budget. There's more detail. We have more detail on pages 30 and 31 regarding the Dental Board of California, if you guys want to look at the detail regarding that. If you guys have any questions on the Dental Board side. Nope, no questions? Okay. For the second portion, for the Dental Assisting Fund, the Dental Assisting Program has spent approximately $1.4 million of the $2.6 million budget, which is approximately 54% of its budget as well. At this point in time, page 32 and 33 provide the additional details if anyone wants to review that for the Dental Assisting Program. Dr. Witcher?
Yeah, I just noticed that the last line on page 33 that has the months in reserve for dental assisting is kind of on a downward trend. And even though our budget is sort of on target, I wonder if there's, we've spent 54% for this year so far. I just wonder, is that any cause for concern?
At this point, it is not a cause of concern. We constantly monitor the budget along with the department to ensure that the board and that the dental assisting program are complying with current laws and regulations. And we typically, the board typically collects, or the dental assisting fund typically collects a good amount in revenue, and there is a reversion of approximately $190,000 a year, so, which will, again, change the numbers. This is the information that was provided in the governor's budget that was released on January 10th. So this doesn't display it doesn't take into account the current expenditures as of now. But once the year-end reports come, we'll include the detailed information here and update the fund condition. And as I've been monitoring it, the dental assisting program and the dental board are fine moving forward. Any other questions on the dental board or the dental assisting program? Yes.
Since the suspension of the exam, shouldn't we have like a surplus? Shouldn't it go, because that was a big expenditure for the dental assisting section. I just since the suspension of the exam for dental assisting, shouldn't there be a surplus somewhere? I mean, there should be more money because we're not spending that to administer that exam anymore.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Wallace. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer. To answer Dr. Lai's question, no, there isn't a surplus. So there was a practical examination fee that the candidates paid for, and that fee went towards the cost of the administration of the exam. So since we're no longer administering the exam, we're no longer collecting that fee. So it's just the application fees at this point.
Thank you.
Did you have another question? Let's go to page 34, item 7, which is a report on the Electric Facial Cosmetic Surgery Permit Credentialing Committee.
Good morning, Dr. Bruce Witcher. I'm board liaison to the Elective Facial Cosmetic Surgery Permit Committee, and we had a conference call meeting on April 10th. I know the committee members would like to thank our executive officer for doing some research and finding that we do not have to have one in-person meeting per year. It's very hard. These members had to have an in-person meeting this time. I'm sorry, I incorrectly misstated it was conference call. And 2 hours for what was probably of travel for a 30-minute meeting is a hardship, especially when these doctors have very busy schedules. So thank you. Basically, just a little bit of background for those of you who may be new to elective facial cosmetic surgery permitting. This was a permit that was authorized by the legislature and convened by the board for a number of years that allows single-degree oral and maxillofacial surgeons to perform elective facial cosmetic surgery that is not normally within the scope of practice of dentistry under their dental license. Many oral surgeons have both medical and dental degrees. If they have a California medical license, they would be practicing under that license. So this permit involves a process by which their qualifications are reviewed, and if appropriate, the committee makes a recommendation to the board to grant permits to suitable applicants. So basically, we reviewed 2 applications, and the committee made recommendations which are now being forwarded to you for action. Applicant number 1 was Dr. Jeremy May, who requested unlimited privileges for Category 1 and Category 2, and those categories are described for you. And the committee also recommended a permit for J. Fedorowicz, unlimited Category 1 and Category 2, limited to blepharoplasty, eye lifts, facial skin resurfacing, and lip augmentation procedures. So the committee is sending to you a request for action for a motion to accept our report and to issue these 2 permits to Dr. May and Dr. Fedorowicz.
Okay. Dr. Lay.
Dr. Witcher, are you asking for 2 separate motions, or would you like to have that in one motion?
What do we need to do here? Can we approve these on one vote, or do they need individual votes?
My recommendation would be to take them individually.
Fine, thank you for that. Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to issue a elective facial cosmetic surgery permit, unlimited Category and Category 2, to Dr. Jeremy May.
I'll move. Second. Hun, Lay, second.
I can't hear. I didn't hear what you said.
Me? Would you like me to repeat what I said? Oh, the motion is to issue a elective facial cosmetic surgery permit for unlimited Category 1 and Category 2 privileges to Dr. Jeremy May.
And I seconded Hun Lay.
Okay. Okay. You got that? Okay. Okay. Let's call for the vote.
Okay, so this is for Dr. May. Burton.
Yes.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram is absent. Lai.
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren. Laren, yes. Lay.
Yes.
Lay, yes. Mackenzie.
Yes.
Mackenzie, yes. Medina.
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow. Yes. Morrow, yes. Alagi. Yes. Alagi, yes. Pacheco. Pacheco, yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher.
Yes.
Witcher, yes. You. Yes. You, yes. Madam President, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Next, I like to move issuance of a permit to J. Fedorowicz, an EFCS permit for unlimited Category 1 and Category 2, limited to blepharoplasty, facial skin resurfacing, and lip augmentation.
Second.
And I, too, would second the motion.
Okay. Call for the vote?
Okay, call for the vote. Burton.
Yes.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai.
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren. Laren, yes. Lay.
Yes.
Lay, yes. Mackenzie. Yes. Mackenzie, yes. Medina.
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow. Yes. Morrow, yes. Alagi. Alagi, yes. Pacheco. Pacheco, yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher.
Yes.
Witcher, yes. You? You, yes. Motion passes.
Before we move on to our next item, which is item 8, starting on page 36, let's take a 5-minute bio break. We are at item 8, Sunset Review. It is starting on page 36 and through page 40 on your agenda.
Good morning. Again, my name is Karen Fisher, and I am the Executive Officer of the Dental Board of California. We're going to be looking at agenda item 8A, and this is the update on the Sunset Review hearing. As President Burton has already mentioned, on April 5th, there were a number of us that went before the joint committee that consisted of members of both the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and the Senate Business, Professions, and Economic Development Committee. They listened to our testimony. We were asked to comment on only 4 items regarding our background report, and they included the Registered Dental Assistant Practical Examination, the Portfolio Pathway to Licensure, foreign dental schools, and the Opioid Crisis. In addition to those questions, the members or the representatives, our board representatives, were asked about whether or not a statutory requirement for an oral surgeon to be one of the 8 dentists on the board appointed by the governor, whether the board had discussed that or whether they would support that idea. Ms. Burton responded that the board had not discussed that idea, although her personal opinion was that our oral surgeon on the board was invaluable in terms of working through the pediatric anesthesia project that we had, and that it was very important to have somebody with that level of expertise on the board at the time as we went through that process. Additional questions that were asked, we always get asked about Botox, and so I was able to respond to that. Just a minor question about time frames and how long it actually takes a complaint to get through the process. We responded that we're always mindful and trying to find more efficient and effective ways to get through the process more quickly. We understand that that's important to consumers. Lastly, Senator Pan asked about continuing education. You all know he's a physician by profession, as well as a senator for the state. He has strong concerns regarding continuing education, and he asked whether or not the board had had issues with conflict of interest for RCE providers. That was an issue that I was unaware of at the time, and so we engaged in a brief discussion with him. I asked if we could follow up with him after the meeting, and I had a brief discussion with one of his legislative aides regarding what his concern was. And in the course of his comment, he did say he doesn't know whether this is or could be an issue in dentistry, but that he felt that it was an issue in medicine. And so later on in this agenda item, we will be discussing continuing education, conflict of interest with regard to our continuing education providers. I'm happy to report that we got support from the California Dental Association and from CalAMUS. They both had their representatives there in support of the dental board being approved for another 4 years. Thank you for that. Thank you for your participation with us as stakeholders in the decisions that the board makes moving forward. Are there any questions about agenda item 8A? Seeing none, we'll go on to agenda item 8B, which essentially is the update, or it's the responses that we submitted to the committee. So what happened with As you all are aware, we worked rigorously, the board members did last year, in putting together our background report. We pulled together all the statistics, all the information, submitted it to the legislature on December 1st. What the process is they took that information, and you will see by this report that they put together their own background report based on the information we gave them, and then they developed their own questions. And so while they only wanted to hear testimony on 4 of those questions, there were a number of issues that were identified that they wanted responses in writing. And I'm just paging through here to find out how many questions there really were. And at this point, there were 14 issues that they wanted a written response. The last issue, of course, being continued regulation or continuing the board moving forward for another 4 years. So what we need to do at this point is go through each issue. Most of the issues had been discussed by board members during the last 4 years, and so they are reflective of what appears in our board meeting minutes. There were a few issues that the board hadn't discussed, and so you will see not only at this meeting, but at the remainder of the meetings going forward into this year, that the board may be discussing other issues that were brought up during the Sunset Review hearing in order to be able to respond at a later date. So we can start with issue number 1, which appears on page 42 of the meeting materials, and it has to do with merging of the funds. At the conclusion of the discussion of these items, I will ask the board for a motion and a second just to accept what was already submitted, and just that's just pro forma. So we'll move forward. Essentially, what had been discussed in prior board meetings was the merging of the 2 funds. And that takes some time, and we'll be working with the DCA Budget Office in order to accomplish that. So as our budget, in our budget report today, you notice that we reported on 2 separate budgets. Our hope is to eventually combine them. The elements of each budget will still remain per se, but it will just be one budget that the board will be managing. Are there any questions about issue number 1? Okay, seeing none. Issue number 2 essentially was about the hygiene board and what our working relationship is with the board. I responded that we have always had an open line of communication with the hygiene board. Thank you, Mr. Anthony Lund, the executive officer, for participating in our meetings. We do have an open door policy and oftentimes talk about issues that have come up. Do any board members have any comments about issue number 2? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to issue number 3. This is the board's legal attorney, or legal counsel. So as I've reported on a number of cases, a number of occasions, while the board typically doesn't get involved in staffing levels, that you're updated in terms of what our staffing levels are, when we have vacancies, when we do recruitments, how that affects our budget. Typically, board members do not get involved with the day-to-day workings and the hirings of our employees. And when we started, when we lost our legal counsel, Spencer Walker, in 2017, it was brought to our attention that in order for the board to have consistency in its legal opinions and move forward, that we thought it would be valuable to hire our own attorney. We have the statutory authority to do so, and we haven't been able to do so up to this point. So we did respond in that respect. That is what issue number 3 is regarding. Are there any questions or concerns about issue number 3? Okay. Issue number 4 has to do with the North Carolina dental case. Essentially, all of you should have received training on this in your board member orientation. It was something that occurred a couple of years ago where the dental board in North Carolina issued a cease and desist regarding teeth whitening. I won't go into the complexities of it, but it did essentially come down from the highest court in the country and put the red flags up all around the country as to whether or not boards that have professional members essentially are somehow impeding upon the marketplace by certain decisions they make. Now, we contend that our regulatory process is very extensive. We have 13 levels of review. Everything our board does is in the name of public protection. And so we're very mindful of how this board makes decisions. But we also do have those levels of review along the way. The legislature is aware and has on a number of occasions tried to introduce legislation that would more strongly indemnify, if you will, members of boards. That has not really moved yet. So this was just the response then we gave. The board is aware that we have to be very mindful moving forward on any decisions or votes that the primary issue is public protection. Any questions or comments? Great, awesome. Number 5 was the biggie, one of our biggies, and this has to do with the Rda Practical Examination. I think that this is pretty well summarized here in this report, and we as a board had gone over this and over this and over this, but I don't know that we could say it enough. The end result was that the board decided that it was not necessary to have a practical examination moving forward. The board is not in the process of trying to evaluate a new practical examination, and that the recommendation is essentially to move forward with the statutory authority to approve RDA licenses based on what we're currently using now, which is the written combined exam. Thank you, Dr. Lai. I think of you every time I think of that. So the combined exam and any of the other requirements that we may have absent the practical examination. Are there any further comments or questions on issue number 5? Issue number 6, we did respond to. It's regarding the portfolio examination. We're not really sure where they were going with this, but we did go on and explain that it's been in the process. We're monitoring it. We're trying to work with the schools to make sure that it continues. And then we went on to say essentially that ADIA is now taking this as a model and trying to work through the nation to have this as the model moving forward for clinical, essentially acceptance of clinical competencies, if you will, upon getting a dental license in each state. So I don't think that there was really any controversies surrounding this portfolio question. I do have to comment that Assemblymember Obernolte, excuse me, it's kind of a mouthful, took a moment during the hearing and actually congratulated the board on all the positive things that he saw in our report. And he himself said, we don't often tell you when you're doing a good job, but he was appreciative that the board was moving forward in essentially eliminating barriers to licensures with like trying to get rid of the practical examination and then moving forward with the portfolio pathway to licensure. So the board did receive compliments, and it is recognized in the legislature that the board is trying to move forward and always looking at dentistry for ways of improvement. Issue number 7 continues to come back every sunset review. It's regarding the evaluation of foreign dental schools. And as you can see, reading through our summary, this isn't the first time we've tried to go down this route, but now that CODA does have an international review, we are strongly recommending that the board get out of the business and accept foreign dental schools who have gone through the CODA approval, international approval process. Are there any questions on issue number 7? Thank you. Number 8 is one of those issues that the board hasn't discussed, this self-applied dental products. You can read what we've responded to in terms of who regulates those self-applied dental products. I can tell you that it hasn't come to the board because we have some complaints and we're doing investigations. So at this point, it's very difficult to know how much the board can discuss. And we will be looking at this issue more closely as we go further into the year. So it's likely that another agenda item will crop up probably within the next 2 board meetings. We'll be able to share a little bit more information. Does anybody have any questions? I know that's a little vague, but do you have any questions or comments?
Just very briefly, I think some of the concern that we're hearing, and this maybe will come up as a future item, is that there are procedures being prescribed over the internet and delivered over the internet that are done by a licensed individual, so they would not be self-applied, and I think that that may be where this ends up going.
Remember to use your card, because then we couldn't acknowledge Dr. Stewart.
The chair's permission, I'd like to back up, Karen, to item number 6, just for a quick question on the portfolio issue. The discussion of portability, is that, what's the context of that discussion, and how will we be, as a group, incorporating that discussion as we move forward, looking at the portfolio question?
Well, to respond to that, it's I'm sure going to be a slow process. Early on, as this portfolio pathway was developed and implemented, we received questions from certain state organizations who wanted presentations, and we went forward, and they have either developed exactly what we have used or have used some portion of it. I think that the board will in the future be looking more closely at that, simultaneously as this idea that's going forward with ADA and ADEA about using essentially the board's portfolio pathway as a sample of what they would like to see go nationwide. Until that happens, I think the board, we will have future discussions about whether or not staff and board should be traveling or communicating more closely with state organizations to see what they're planning to do. I think it's multifaceted in that you may have the dental community in a state supporting something, but does the dental board, the regulatory board, also support it? So while stakeholder organizations can go out and seek support for this idea, inroads also have to be made essentially with the regulatory agencies. And so we've had minimal contact with those regulatory agencies to this point. I believe Colorado, Iowa, there may be a few more. But right now, unless you're applying to another state by licensure by credential, and therefore having been licensed in California for a number of years, it is likely that the majority of the states are not just wholeheartedly accepting somebody who has a California license by portfolio. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. There's still much work to do. While there's still much work to do, I think that it's important to recognize that our model is being used on the national stage. It's going to take some time, and I was hoping that ADEX would be here to give their presentation today, because from what I understand, their only exam now is the hybrid model. So it's not the same model that REB uses. So we'll have a further report on that in August.
So I think last meeting, Dr. Morrow, I think you gave me this. And this was a report of the Task Force of Assessment of Readiness for Practice. It's a joint task force between ADA, ADE, American Dental Education Association, and American Student Dental Association. And so the task force got together, and this report was issued September 2018, and it kind of lays out everything. So if we could maybe have this distributed to all the board members in the future, or somehow disseminate this to them. This explains a lot of what they're trying to do in making CODA the kind of deciding factor and getting everybody together on one page. So the portability is going to be better for all students, all practitioners in the United States. So I was reading through this. It's actually very, very helpful, and thank you for that. So I brought it with me if I'm going to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Lai. We'll make sure that we distribute that to board members.
Thank you. On the subject of portability, I just recently received notice through ADEA, American Dental Education Association, that the state of Arizona just passed and the governor signed a bill that authorizes licensure by credential from any state or licensing agency. We actually have 53 rather than 50 because we have Puerto Rico, I think the Virgin Islands, and one other one, I think Guam or something like that. Anyway, any license by credential with 12 months of practice. And I understand, according to ADEA's information, that this is the first state that has opened up their doors to licensure, not only for dentists, but for any professional license that has been inactive for 12 months. Again, following background checks and so forth. But as far as length of practice is concerned, our current credentialing process requires 5 years of practice in order to qualify for portability of a license.
Thanks for the information. Does that include the foreign dental schools that are approved?
To my knowledge, I'm not sure that it included that. I have not read the bill completely itself. This was just an announcement that was sent out to members of ADEA.
I did hear that some of the LaSalle students were able to move to another state, but I wasn't sure where. Thank you.
Dr. Morrow, thank you for your comment. At a future board meeting, we're actually going to be discussing licensure by credential and that issue. And I guess it's going to have to be considered along with the portfolio discussion. So, I mean, to some degree, if the movement moves forward where graduation from dental school is enough, from a quota-approved dental school is enough, where does that leave this move to have another clinical exam, if you will? Or if the portfolio is accepted by all the schools, all the quota schools in the country, how does this all fit together? So we will be reporting on that information that you just recently received. Any additional questions on portfolio or foreign dental schools or consumer products? Okay, I think this now finds us at issue number 9. Let me just make sure here. Yeah. So issue number 9 has to, again, to do with our enforcement targets, if you will. And we are in the process of auditing our units, and we will probably have a more detailed report in August. But the process improvements that we've made in the initial unit of the complaint and compliance unit have been phenomenal. We've dropped down to two-digit days, if you will, for initially some of the processes that we've had whereby a complaint is actually, the records are received. We've jumped down from a number of days like 100, 200, 300 days to get records down to 45. So that's going to be huge. And we're very excited about it. We're very excited that it's looking like it's been very successful in the first unit, and we're going to be taking this essentially audit process to see if we can apply it for all of our other units, our investigative unit and our actually the sworn unit. So we did report on the timelines at the hearing, and just let the legislature know that we're not complacent in this, so that we are moving forward, always looking at ways to decrease the timelines to be more responsive to consumer complaints. Are there any additional questions or comments about issue number 9? Guess I know you guys pretty well. You agree with me. Love it. Okay. Opioid crisis, of course, another big issue that the board has taken on, and we were happy to report at the hearing that the board at the February meeting moved forward with regulations that will require mandatory training in opioids. And so we didn't have any additional comments about that, other than they were mindful of us keeping an eye on this and being involved with it. Are there any additional comments on issue number 10? Okay, on issue number 11 is essentially something that we've been hearing about for many years. So this is something that legislators in the legislature feel strongly about, particularly Senator Hill, in that if a licensee is put on probation, that the licensee should be required to notify their patient base, essentially, that they're on probation. The medical board and other boards last year, this went into law, and this is now something that's being considered by the legislature for the dental board. We understand this language will be appearing in our sunset review, that under certain circumstances, probationers will be required to notify their patients of their probation. So as you see in my response that we had not discussed this, is there any further comment or discussion on this item? Dr. Morrow.
Thank you. It's my understanding that this information is already available to prospective patients on our website.
Could you move your mic closer? Could you move your mic closer?
It's on.
Move it closer.
Oh, closer, I'm sorry. I understand that this information is already available to the public on the dental board's website by searching for a prospective dentist for the patient to go to for services.
That's correct.
So since it's already available, do we need to address the situation from requiring that the dentist post it? I think that seems to be an unnecessary requirement since it's available.
Does that require a response? Is there a question in there?
It was a statement more than a question.
Okay.
Okay.
It's been a little while since I reviewed the final legislation for MedBoard, but it was amended pretty extensively. In the final version, it was only offenders who did pretty egregious things that actually had to notify their patients. And I believe there was an agreement even reached with CMA that although they didn't like it, they would go along with it. And do we have any sense of what might be coming our way in this regard?
Yes, the sense is that the language that the dental board language will mirror the medical board language.
It's okay. I got it. It's okay. So I just find that if somebody had to put something or notify their patients, what's the likelihood of that happening realistically? And how would the board enforce that if they weren't compliant with that? Even though you say to them, you have to contact your patients, and they said, no, it's going to kill my business. What legal way or how can we enforce any of that if they're not complying with that? So I don't believe it's a realistic, proposition. I don't know. Can you answer what would be our fallback, or how are we going to put them out of business? Are we going to put it on the website again? It goes absolutely nowhere.
Okay, I'm going to tread very carefully on this. Of course, we are here for public protection. The board would only know if a violation of the requirement occurs if we receive a complaint. Okay? And I just want to remind the board that the discussion should always be centered around public protection, though I know it's difficult as practicing dentists for you not to also go beyond that and say what effect will it have on business. But I think that if you focus the discussion more on will the public benefit from this additional resource so that they know fully what they're dealing with when they go into a dental office. I don't know how many of our licensees this would honestly affect. We can get a report from Mr. Alvarez when we go to the enforcement section about how many probationers we have. But as Dr. Witcher said, it's my understanding that it will be for the most egregious behavior, which actually the dental board tries to revoke licenses for the most egregious behavior, such as sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, those types of things. So at this point, we'll need to stay tuned to what the language actually looks like before any further comment probably should be made.
Yeah, so I think, Karen, you were kind of taking it in the direction that I wanted to comment, which was consumer protection, because yes, while we would have it posted on our website, like as I was thinking about it, I was thinking that even if someone looks before they go to their dentist the first time, which I have only recently since I've been on the board, but I will admit, I don't go look before every appointment that I go to. You kind of look, even if you look in the beginning and then never again. And so from a consumer protection standpoint, I understand the rationale and the reasoning, because something can come up in the interim that I don't think most people would ever know about otherwise.
Any other comments or questions on this issue?
Final comment. I think then we have to look back at each case that we agree upon, and the ALJs being too lenient on certain issues, go back to that instead of putting a Band-Aid on it that maybe we need to enforce certain things after the fact rather than take each case by case and vet it properly and decide properly and make sure our decisions are more strong or have more force. And I think that's the issue that I want to present.
So noted. So I think that once the language is actually published, we will gather background information in order to to help you better understand where this is going. Also, I think it is a good idea to talk about what you're mentioning. You know, I mean, when something like this goes into statute, how does it affect stipulated settlements? How does it affect proposed decisions? So this is an opportunity to review for the boards to look more closely at these things. So you're right. And I think that we'll give you the numbers in terms of how many probationers we have, and that'll be included in any future discussions we have about this issue. Okay, we're going to move on to issue number 12. And this is the Dynamex issue. And I think we'll delay this discussion because we actually have that taken out of this section. And Noreen is going to give us a little synopsis of what the Dynamex decision is. When this question came out, I was really unaware of what Dynamex was and how or why it would affect the board. So you'll see that the response is we're going to be looking into this, and Noreen, Ms. Marks, will be giving that in just a few minutes. So we did report on our pediatric anesthesia report and gave an explanation about essentially what's happening with the changes of SB 501. And just to remind board members, we have positions that have been designated to essentially implement the provisions of SB 501. As soon as the governor signs the budget, then we have the go-ahead to start recruiting for those positions. We'll be filling them, and then we can start to make the changes that are necessary as dictated by Senate Bill 501. Are there any questions or comments about agenda item 13? Okay. We're almost there. Issue number 14 is just technical cleanup. And we're always looking for technical cleanup. We always take comments from our stakeholders. If they're finding something in statute that contradicts each other, we want to know about that. We want to know whether regulations are outdated or don't coincide with statutory changes that have been made. So this is a constant. So that's an ongoing thing. And then obviously I think that most board members would agree that we do think the regulation of dentistry should continue for another 4 years. For those of you interested in keeping your job on the board. And at this point, I'm interested in keeping my job on the board, and since I rely on you all to do that, so I don't expect that we should have really any hurdles to have to go over. I would hope that there aren't any surprises out there. So far, the process has been very smooth, so we'll keep hoping that it goes in that direction. So, did you want to take the vote on that now, Noreen? Accepting essentially the report?
Only, that's fine unless you think we need to come back to it after the discussion on Dynamex.
Okay. All right, so we'll continue with the other agenda items in 8, and then at the conclusion of all of the discussions of the Section 8, we'll come back and ask for a motion to essentially accept the sunset review responses that were submitted. So we're going on now to agenda item 8C, which is on page 62 of your meeting materials. And this is the discussion about Senator Pan's comments or questions regarding conflict of interest. So pretty much we had the staff go ahead and do the research on this. We hadn't received any complaints. And the bottom line is he really wants to ensure that any continuing education providers are truly providing education and not being used as sort of selling products. I think this board is very mindful of that because when the periodontists came forward and wanted the support of the board for a National Gum Disease Awareness Month, The board was very concerned that their essentially endorsement of that would somehow allow the board's name to be used in the future as an endorsement for a product, perhaps. So the board is very aware of that. As I said, to my knowledge, I don't believe that we do have an issue, and I guess I will ask board members to comment. We have CE providers that are Serp or PACE approved, and both of those organizations have conflict of interest statements and things that need to be signed by the providers. Other than that, whether or not the board decides that we perhaps need to put something in our regulations, our continuing education regulations, that could be done. You could decide that what we're doing is appropriate and no additional action needs to be taken. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to comments that people may have. I know that I got some comments from Dr. Laren and Dr. Witcher, other people who want to weigh in on this idea. You know, does the board need to have? Well, Senator Pan asked if we had a policy, and we typically don't have policies. It's either in statute or regulation. So I would recommend that if the board thinks something needs to be done, that we look at it either in statute or regulation. So that being said, we can open it up for discussion. And we had Dr. Richer and Dr.
Laren. As a former continuing education committee chairman, I wrestled with this issue because the group had both medical and dental licensees, and so we had to have a non-disclosure policy for our CE to be eligible for credit for physician members who happen to have a dental license. A lot of this, the ADA published the policy, which is referred to here in this nice report, and it's nice to see the board staff did excellent homework on this. Most of this comes out of the American Council on Continuing Medical Education. They have a policy document. Their document is, I wouldn't suggest that everybody read it, but it's very interesting in that they say that there isn't a lot of evidence what the actual effect of commercial support is on the, perhaps the prescribing or buying habits of licensees. There is weak evidence that prescribing may be affected in medicine. I know the drug detail man going around and doing lunch is legendary. And so, there is an issue there within medicine, whether it extends to dentistry. It's not really been looked at. But the ADA did come out with a position paper on which, of course, their own standards and also the Academy of General Dentistry adopted standards as well. But the interesting thing is you got to distinguish between commercial bias and conflict of interest and how that can influence licensees attending a course. In other words, if you have a lecturer who, I'm going to quote here, has, say, intellectual commitment to a particular therapeutic approach, limited expertise about a topic, they're acting like an expert, but they're not, methodological shortcomings in their data. In other words, they're saying this data is great, but it isn't, and I think we've seen examples of this. Or they just have plain poor judgment. How do we screen out those kind of influences? Those may be actually more important than commercial bias. So anyway, they suggested, a more comprehensive approach. In other words, reviewing course content, but I don't know that we certainly don't have the resources to do that. But I'm just saying it's actually a very complicated question. I think it deserves looking at what the ADA and ADA Serp came out with, perhaps using that as a model initially, but also understanding that, there is a meta-analysis of the literature that looked at this and really couldn't come to a clear conclusion about whether this was a significant issue or not.
Thank you for that explanation. Very scientific. Mine is going to be very simple. I have also been CE chair and for a long time in the past, and it's just amazing sometimes some of these meetings. I just went to a meeting where it sounded like a commercial the entire meeting. And I don't think it's fair for us, for the public. We want to learn, we want to gain experience and knowledge, and it ends up being like a commercial. So I really think we should have a policy for conflict of interest, for commercial, for not having commercial. The ADA policy, the AGD has a policy that we can take from this and apply it to our experience. Now, I also wanted to, do we have a process for obtaining complaints? I don't think many people are going to complain about it. They just go to the meeting and they sit and they listen to this, and they might be upset about it. And I think some people are very upset about having a conflict of all these different products being sold or like marketing, and it can become an issue, although it's been a lot better in the recent years. But I have seen it just recently. I went to a meeting, I couldn't believe there's so many commercials. So these guidelines that the ADA has with the Serp are I think are very important. I think that's why Dr. Pam, the senator, brought this up, because it is an issue. It's an issue. It's a serious issue at some meetings, and you might not be getting complaints, but it is an issue. So I was going to ask if we have a process for receiving complaints.
Well, the process is the same. A complaint is a complaint. So essentially, it would be a complaint by dentists can file complaints. Whether or not, where it occurs, whether we have any jurisdiction over that, that will have to be determined once we get the complaint, but we can't look into something unless we get a complaint. So I'm glad this was brought up and brought before the board, because I've never heard this discussion before. So on the one hand, you're saying this, it would be nice to get an input from other board members who have attended CEs that have a similar experience, or is it just focused down in San Diego?
No, it's not.
Okay.
But I mean, because most people have the ADA Serp, they're now handling it very well.
Okay.
And because of that, otherwise it wouldn't be. It would probably be happening much more. So if we don't have it in California, I think it's a good idea to start something, even if it's simple procedure and a way to file a complaint form or something that might be useful to be able to complain or be aware that you can turn in a complaint.
Right. Yes. So if anybody ever asks you as board members, just have them contact us. We can take complaints over the phone. We can take them via email. We can take them on Breeze. We can take them, call us up, fill out a complaint form. So yes, anytime anybody has a complaint about anything, just go ahead and have them file with us. And then that's how we can start to look into the issues and find out what's happening.
Well, yeah, that's important, but I think the policy for the conflict of interest is much more important.
Okay. And Dr. Witcher, just to follow up, are you talking about the revisions that were essentially accepted at the April 25th meeting this year for the Commission on Continuing Education Provider Recognition at Serp?
No, I was
mentioned
talking
something
about from the medical side.
Okay.
From American Council on Graduate
I
Medical
thought
Education.
I heard you mention something about the ADA Serp eligibility requirements.
Well, I refer to those generally, and
Okay.
that would include any recent amendments.
Okay, so it's interesting because we just got the notice that ADA Serp eligibility criteria was revised, and essentially what they're revising it to say is commercial interests are not eligible for recognition. So they're taking a very strong stance. We will, should the board decide to move forward with doing something more with this, in other words, investigating, getting more background information to determine whether you would want to have something in statute or regulation relating to conflict of interest, a strong statement, that we would agendize for a future meeting and bring back more information. But if there are any other comments from board members about their participation already in continuing education seminars, I'd like to continue the discussion, and I think Dr. Stewart was next. Or was Dr.
I'm not sure I was, but I'm happy to. In Kern County Dental Society, we have about 6 courses per year. I go to most of those, and my experience is that most speakers start off the day by making sure that the salespeople that are in the back of the room that are supporting financially that lecture, because the lectures do, the speakers get anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, $6,000, and for a dental society to come up with that money is kind of difficult. So we do rely on the different companies to help sponsor those speakers, but they're very clear about the relationship that they have with these companies, that they are going to be talking about some of those materials, but they're not endorsing those materials. So in my experience, most of the speakers are pretty clear about outlining any conflicts of interest and that sort of thing. But I would also support a further conversation, because I think something should be down so that we can point to that clarifies this issue. I would support that moving forward.
Thank you. It is my understanding, and I think it's the understanding of the majority in the room, if not all, that the dental board does not approve courses. They approve providers. A question that I have is, a provider status, does that have to be renewed on a regular basis? And number 2, at that renewal, is there an audit conducted of those providers that could require documentation relating to notification of conflict of interest for participants of a presentation or a course? I understand that a conflict of interest by a presenter, if advised prior to attending the meeting, that's acceptable. But I think there needs to be some documentation, maybe in the audit process, if it isn't already, to document whether or not the providers have met that requirement.
My subject matter expert is just coming back into the room, Sarah. Dr. Morrow had a question about CE providers. How often do they renew, whether or not an audit is done? Is that something we'll get back to him on?
So our CE providers renew their registered providership with the board every 2 years. They pay a renewal fee. As part of their renewal, they provide a biennial report that lists all of the courses and the course dates that they provided those courses. We audit those and keep those in files. To date, we haven't found any issues with any of those CE providers. We also accept complaints, and we have a complaint processing system. Upon researching that, we haven't found any complaints relating to any issues for our CE providers.
Dr. Lai.
I'm just mirroring Dr. Stewart's comments earlier about disclosures. I've been to numerous meetings, CDA, ADA, ceramic symposiums, and most of the speakers do disclose that they are not endorsed or they are endorsed. So I don't think that's my issue with the subject. My issue with the subject is it a conflict of interest, or are we concerned about the CEs, or are we concerned about public protection? So if it's public protection, our hat would be to make sure the CE was relevant to dentistry, and as well as is qualified as a bona fide educational addition to their knowledge. So is it hurting somebody, or is it we're concerned about the licensure, the CE, and how many, if the C qualifies? So that's my comment on that. And the question is it a protection of the public, or is it the CE aspect of it, the licensure aspect of it.
Is that a question? Okay.
That's a question.
I think that that's a question that should be discussed and answered when it sounds like the board is moving in the direction to agendize this at a future meeting to determine whether or not to move forward. So we're recording this meeting, and I will be in contact with those board members to talk specifically about what issues should be considered when we're talking about this at a future meeting. I think, Dr. Yu, did you have a comment?
I think in dentistry, overall speaking, we are doing pretty good. I attend so many different CE courses. I hardly see too many commercial involved in it. Not like medicine. I do get chances to attend some medical CE course also. And then I think the staff recommendation is adequate. That will be good enough.
Okay, is there any further discussion? So is there, there probably needs to be a motion regarding how you want to proceed. Because I heard Dr. Laren say she would support a stronger statement by the board through statute or regulation regarding conflict of interest.
I'd like to make a motion for that.
So what I'm getting at is that number 2 on page 62 says, if the board considers further action is necessary, direct staff to develop regulatory language to bring back to a future board meeting. Are we there yet, or did we want to have just a more robust discussion with more information brought back for the board to consider?
I think that I would suggest the latter. I've heard a number of things here that not are conflicting, but are a number of interests here. So I would suggest that we agendize this for the next meeting to have a further discussion. And perhaps after you gather all the questions, that can help to frame what the discussion will be.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Why don't you get a second, and then you could acknowledge
I'd like to second that, Stuart.
Dr.
Okay.
Stewart seconded. Dr. Lay?
So with just my own clarification, with all this discussion, we're only talking about the providers that are approved by the Dental Board of California, correct? We're not talking about the PACE or the Serp approved providers.
Well, I think at this point, we're talking about bringing the issue back and essentially giving the board members the information on Serp or PACE to decide whether that goes far enough. And if so, whether that language perhaps would be mirrored for the others. So I don't know that that decision needs to be made at this point. The motion on the floor is to bring the issue back for the August meeting to essentially discuss further, and I'll be in contact with individual board members to find out if they have specific issues that they think need to be included in that discussion, and we'll have the background information. Okay, so we have a motion and a second?
Yes.
Did you want to take public comment?
It's a whole lot to, it's a big thing to bite off here, but I'm going to ask if there is public comment. If you could follow that discussion. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, then I'm going to call for the question.
Burton.
Yes.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram is absent. Lai.
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren. Lay. Lay, yes. McKenzie. Yes. McKenzie, yes. Medina.
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow. Morrow, yes. Alagi. Alagi, yes. Pacheco. Pacheco, yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher. Witcher, yes. You. You, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you, board members. We're now on agenda item 8D, as in dog, on page 66. And basically, this is just, as President Burton had mentioned, our sunset bill is going to be AB 1519. And right now, it doesn't have a lot of information in it. So the vehicle has started down the road, so to speak. It has gone through its first committee. It is now in Assembly Appropriations. It needs to be out of there by Friday. And we understand that at some point during this process, the substance of our sunset review requests will appear in writing. But as of now, the bill actually looks like what's in your packet, which is not much. But we have been told essentially that all the bullets that you see on page 66 of the meeting materials are going to be included in the language. Now, staff has seen the language, but we can't officially bring that to a board meeting because you need to be looking at the official document. We're not sure when that's going to occur. We heard that amendments could be introduced at any part. It actually could go in this form over to the Senate side, and then all the information is inserted at that time. So we'll keep on that, and as soon as it's in print, we'll make sure that dental board members get a copy of that, and it may be necessary to have a special meeting prior to our August meeting, which we would do by teleconference. So we will keep you posted. And like I said, this is highly unusual. We haven't had this in the past go like this. Usually we would know by now what the bulk of the legislation is going to look like, but we have been working closely with both committees, and at least the issues we've expressed concern about are in the bill, as well as that issue on probation and the notification by probationers to their client base. Are there any questions? It's AB 1519. Okay, then I think that brings us to agenda item 8E, located on page 69 in your material. And this is relating to the Dynamics case, and I'm going to hand this over to our legal counsel, Ms. Marks.
Thank you. The Dynamics case involved a wage order, and whether or not there was an employer, or an independent contractor relationship with respect to that wage order. Now, there are several contexts in which the employment relationship is relevant. It's relevant in wage orders. It's relevant with respect to workers' comp, with respect to unemployment, with respect to state and federal rights. So this Dynamics case was specific as to wage orders. And wage orders generally are going to be looking at questions on minimum wage, maximum hours, and some minimum working conditions, some very basic working conditions such as meal and rest breaks. And what happened in Dynamics is the court looked at the relationship and the test for that relationship in that employment, and whether or not it was employer-employee or an independent contractor relationship, and changed the test that had previously been applied for quite a few years. So what the court said is that in those wage order claims, there now was what's called an ABC test, or referred to an ABC test. And there's now a presumption that when you look at those wage order claims that there is an employer-employee relationship as opposed to an independent contractor relationship, and that in order to overcome that presumption, that the hiring entity must establish 3 factors. And one is that the worker is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, that the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business, and that the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade or occupation or business. So what you have now is 2 bills that have been introduced, and one is AB 5, which codifies the Dynamex case. And so far, there haven't been any cases that have looked at whether or not a different test applies outside of this wage order claim context. So AB 5 codifies Dynamex, and then AB 71 would return the law to as it existed pre-Dynamex, which was a multi-factor test that the courts would apply to determine whether or not there was an employer-employee relationship or an independent contractor relationship. Whether or not that question has consumer protection implications that overlap with what the board's charges isn't clear to me. It's really sort of a business management question, and I don't know if the board has even seen cases where that implicates consumer protection issues. So I'm not sure that the board has a viewpoint or approach one way or the other in looking at AB 5 or AB 71, or whether or not you want to find out if the association, which might more appropriately be looking at advising licensees as to their business management practices, if they would want to speak as to AB 5 or AB 71. There might be cases I can think of where, the business management issues overlap, but, right now I'm not entirely sure. I could come up with a situation where the implication would, as to how a licensee sets up his or her business, would overlap that much with the board's statutory authority and priority for consumer protection. So that's just a kind of a brief overview of Dynamex and what the case law has done since then. And I can try to answer any questions.
Okay. Dr. Locke.
Did you have a question? Dr. Lay, you had a question? Oh, okay. Just as a response to this case, I personally see it as either an accounting tax issue, business issue, versus a protection issue. I think independent contractors fall under a different tax schedule, and businesses that don't have to deal with certain types of issues such as workman's comp and liability as far as insurances. I think it's more of an accounting issue than a protection of the public issue.
I'm sorry, was that?
So the question is this addressing this issue, this case? And what we're trying to discuss is that something for us that we need to take action on?
Well, if the board wanted to look at AB 5, AB 71, and decide whether to take action on those. I don't know that there's any other action for the board to take with respect to the case law. At this point, it would be before the board, really only with respect to those two cases. And as I said, potentially the board would want to take a position on one of those two bills, but you might see it as much more appropriate for the association to take positions as opposed to the board.
So I'm thinking, it doesn't seem like a big issue for the board to take on, and if so, we would have to also ask dental hygiene board to chime in on this because it does affect them, and eventually it's more. It didn't seem like it was that big of an issue than what we're making it to be.
Unless it can be laid out for the board how the wage order claim issues overlap with consumer protection, I'm not sure it's a big issue for the board at this point. And perhaps that can be described to the board, and the board then would want to take a position. Right now, the issue before the board is a discussion of the case, and more specifically, how AB 5 or AB 71, which takes sort of different views of that case, would impact your licensing population as it pertains to consumer protection. I mean, you could still decide to take a position on one or both of those bills right now, unless it's described more fully for me as to how those wage order claims overlap with consumer protection. I'm not sure if the board would want to take a position or not.
Did you withdraw your question?
And I don't quite understand the overlay because the overlay is, at least in this case, in the background, describing dental hygienist, but in tort, the question can come where, as a host dentist, you engage someone like an itinerant coming into your office. Where does the responsibility lie if something happens when the itinerant comes into the office? And that comes under consumer protection also. So does the responsibility also come into effect with the host office? I think that would be another question.
I'm going to go to Dr. Lay, and then I'm going to ask for public comment.
Okay. Yeah. It seems to me like this is more of a labor law issue and not the dental board issue. Because it doesn't just apply, I mean, I know the examples here are dental hygienists and alternative practice, but it would also apply, just like Dr. Chan was saying, that it's the host practitioner owner, practice owner. So that's, like, this could apply also to the associate, the junior associate dentists that work for somebody. It could also apply to the dentists who work for a DSO. So it doesn't just stop at the dental hygiene, personnel. And really, the arrangement is really between the owner of the practice and also the associates, whether that be like, a dental hygienist, alternative practice, or a junior, dentist. So, yeah, I appreciate the discussion and all that, but I just feel like this is probably not something that the dental board wants to take on.
I can see that obviously it would impact the hygienists, the dental assistants. It might impact the anesthesiologists who come into a dentist's office. But again, right now, the case law we have is that Dynamex applies to the wage order claims, and we don't know the other contexts that the employer-employee relationship or an independent contractor relationship where those tests get applied.
And I'm just reminding board members, this was put on the agenda because it was an issue brought up by the Oversight Committee. This is an awesome discussion we've been having, and when we bring out our minutes for this meeting, I would like you to review this section closely, because essentially this is what our response is going to be as we move along. So there's a number of opportunities for the board to essentially submit things in writing to the Oversight Committee. Certainly before the next 4 years occurs, our responses will be updated to include the information that we didn't respond to. So the idea behind putting this on was so that the board members become familiar with it. I didn't see that there wasn't this overlapping issue between public protection and essentially employment, the dental employment. It could in the future move in that direction. So now board members are aware of it. We can be watching things that are happening and certainly continue to discuss it if it needs to be. I asked Ms. Marks to report on the legislation. There is no staff recommendation to support either pieces of legislation at this point.
CDA.
Mary McKeown with California Dental Association. Just for informational purposes, we do have a small legislative update. For AB 5, we are seeking and expect to have an amendment in the bill that specifically exempts dentists in addition to doctors. And then our understanding is that AB 71 never received its first policy hearing, so it died in the Labor and Employment Committee.
Good morning. Anthony Lum, Executive Officer of the Dental Hygiene Board. Our board met last month, and we took a watch position on both these bills just due to the fact of their content and whether the question was of consumer protection or not. So we're just watching this bill. Currently, our licensees, an RDHAP can be an independent contractor. However, a registered dental hygienist cannot with the current law in place.
Hi, Susan McCormick. I'm an oral surgeon in San Diego. I personally think that this is an extremely important topic for the board going forward. The trend now is for a lot of colleagues coming out of training with specialty training to not go into practices directly, but to become itinerants. And I believe it's important moving forward for the sake of transparency and public protection that as this issue develops, to consider having people self-identify that they are just an itinerant within a practice rather than of a practice, because I think that that would make a difference in terms of credentialing. And as you said, Stephen said, perhaps when things go sideways, where does the responsibility lie? Either with the practice to assume credentialing, such as is done with an employer-employee relationship, which may not be required by an independent contractor relationship. So I think the credentialing issue is ultimately going to be part of the importance moving forward in terms of protecting the public.
Yes, Madam President, unless anyone else has any other questions, I don't think I have anything to add.
Was it the intention to look at these two bills in terms of a position at this time?
The board has the option of doing that if it would like to.
As I I would like just to restate that the Dynamics issue is on the agenda in order to respond to the Sunset Review report. The two bills that were introduced, now having received the most recent update that the second one is gone, the staff has no recommendation, does not believe that the board needs to take a position on AB 5, and so at this time. If you agree with that, no action needs to be taken on this item. If you disagree, then have a motion stated otherwise.
I understand the nexus that can be drawn with public protection, but when I think about what our role is as regulators, it's my feeling that this is not something that we need to take a position on at this time. And I'm not putting that out there as an edict, but it's something that we can talk about whether we agree with or not. So if it will help, I will make a motion that we take no position on the legislation at this time.
I second that motion.
Okay, so move Burton and second Morrow. No position. Any discussion?
And that's
On AB 5.
specifically fine.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm in agreement with the motion and the second, but I also think it's an important area for further discussion down the road. So if we can capture the thought that this is something that we can do some research on and bring back to help us all understand these issues, I think I would be in support of that as well.
So noted.
Okay. Is there any further public comment? Then,
Just make one more.
beg pardon?
Yeah, I'd just make one more comment before you.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, as I understand the two bills, it's, they determine what test is applied to look at the relationship. There's no designation of what that relationship is. It's really just the test that is applied with wage order claims to determine whether or not there's an employer-employee relationship or an independent contractor relationship.
So we're calling for the vote, and it's for no position on AB 5, 8E. That's okay. Burton.
Aye.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai.
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren. Laren, yes. Lay. Lay, yes. Mackenzie. Mackenzie, yes. Medina.
No.
No. Medina, no. Morrow. Morrow, yes. Alagi. Alagi, yes. Pacheco. Pacheco, yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher. Witcher, yes. You. You, yes. Motion passes.
Which one? Okay. So we are going to now go back and, I'm sorry. We're going to go back to B, item B on the agenda, 8B, and I'd like a motion to accept the report.
I'll make that motion. Stewart?
I'm sorry. You know, we've got a overhead thing and we can't hear up here, so.
I'd like to make that motion. Stewart?
Witcher, second.
Did not do any public comment on this item, so is there public comment? Seeing none, call for the vote.
Burton.
Aye.
Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Sorry. Burton, aye. Chan, aye. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai?
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren? Laren, yes. Lay? Lay, yes. Mackenzie? Mackenzie, yes. Medina?
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow? Morrow, yes. Alagi? Alagi, yes. Pacheco? Pacheco, yes. Stewart?
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher? Witcher, yes. You? You, yes. Motion passes.
We did what, AB 5? Okay. 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 It is now just about noon. It's about 9 minutes to noon. And let's take lunch, and we're going to do an hour and a half. And then we will come back with item number 9. Wow. So 1:30.
Madam President, is this room going to be secured? We can leave our